Greetings, this is Dave Evans. Pleased to be joining the Institute of Coaching affiliated with McLean. It's a great day to be here, although I can't quite be there. And in fact, due to bandwidth issues and travel issues at the very last minute, I'm now pre-recording the presentation to make sure that you can actually hear me and see what we're talking about. Now, Jeff has asked me to cover a lot of material today. I normally talk really fast, but I'm not going to talk any slower than I usually do. So here we go. We're talking about designing your life and what does it got to do with coaching? Okay, so just a quick shout out, first of all, to my buddy Bill Burnett, the slightly shorter guy next to me there. He is the executive director of design at Stanford, the guy with whom at a lunch in 2007, we apparently decided to do all this and launch this thing called the Life Design Lab at Stanford. So what is it we do? Okay, the agenda, first of all, two big chunks of this presentation. We're talking about an overview and we're talking about 4 quick tools. So the overview will cover what's the problem we're solving? What is design thinking anyway? What's design your life in a nutshell if I haven't got time to read the whole book? And what's our coaching point of view? Then scanning across the entire toolkit, according to Jeff's favorites, what tools do we want to look at today? We're going to look at the Good Time Journal, the Compass, Odyssey Planning, and a specific set of things we have about designing your COVID life. And then I'll come back on actually live and we'll do some Q&A about that material. So here we go. Jumping into that overview. So we teach this class called Designing Your, been doing it for 15 years now. Designing Your Life, we teach to juniors and seniors. Designing Your Stanford, how to design your college experience, we teach to first and second year students, freshmen and sophomores. And then designing the professional to PhDs and master's students. We actually teach about 15% going on 20% depending on the quarter of all the students at Stanford. Now Stanford's not a prep school, they're not all rich kids, but they are very bright. And so, Harvard's not a bad school, but Harvard's pretty top tier stuff. But Stanford, we got some bright kids too. And so why do they need to take this remedial figure your life out class? What's that all about? Well, we're user-centered designers here at Stanford. So when in doubt, talk to the user. So if we go to a college senior at Stanford and ask that penetrating question, what are you going to do with your life after you graduate? Here's what some of the, not necessarily richest, but some of the smartest kids on the planet have to say about that penetrating question.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I was going to go to med school, but some grades changed that. I think I'm going to go to law school.
Yeah. My favorite guy right there.
I have no idea.
Okay, did we wait all day long for the 12 clueless kids at Stanford to make the course look good? No, this takes about 5 minutes to get. You want to know where we got that video? At a career fair, literally around the corner from the wall where that young man is standing, the booths and everything. He's going to walk around the corner, I promise you, and go, hi, I can't wait to be a product manager at Google. I've wanted to be one since I was 6 years old. But when you put him in front of one of his peers holding the video camera and ask the question, the honest answer is, I have no idea. So what is going on with that? Well, here's the thing about Stanford, and Harvard and other top schools is we're really good at smart kids and teaching you how to win the game of school, but smart has nothing to do with clear, and being good at school has nothing to do with life. And so we didn't used to teach life at school, and now we're changing that. That's what we think the problem is. So Bill and I say, we got a mission here, we got a problem. So let's form this thing called the Life Design Lab. Our mission is to apply the innovation principles of design thinking to the wicked problem of designing your life at and after college. That's the formal elevator pitch. What's that elevator pitch? What's that really mean? That means we teach the courses to help you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. But even that we would reframe, because who wants to be done growing up? We want to keep growing. We're coaches. We help people do better things at all ages. I'm 67, for God's sake. So what we really do is help you keep figuring out what you want to become next. Now we say it that way and pretty much everybody kind of goes, ooh, can I take the class? And up until recently, unless you were one of the 16,000 people on our campus, the answer was no. And then Bill said, we've got to stop saying no. We're not no kind of guys, so let's write a book. We wrote a book, which was delayed 2 years because I didn't want to do it. And to my great surprise, it became a New York Times bestseller. Then we write another book, and then Jeff and the IOC calls and says, hey, come talk to our coaches. Like, holy cow, what's going on here? Why is this all happening? Well, it's because people are stuck. People are stuck on dysfunctional beliefs, ideas that are either just flat out untrue, or at least they're not generative, not going to keep you moving forward. And there are a whole bunch of them out there. Just a few to highlight very briefly, perhaps the single most popular one we run into. What's your passion? Or as we say in Silicon Valley, what's your passion? Are you passionate about, coaching or McLean or IOC? And here's the problem. Wait, I mean, who doesn't want a passionate life? What's wrong with, why is that dysfunctional, Dave? Well, because according to the research, 8 out of 10 people answer this question with either, boy, I don't have one yet, I'm really hoping to find it, or I've got a bunch. Which one did you want to hear about first? And if you're either of those two completely normal people, this question leaves you feeling like there's something wrong with you. Let's not start with a question that says 8 out of 10 healthy people are screwed up, because they're not screwed up. This brings up a really important idea for us, which is that questions matter. Particularly, you have to check a question's belief systems. All questions believe something. So before you give a question the power to be a life organizing or a life judging question, be sure you buy into its belief system. This believes everyone has a passion. You'll know it early in life. The world is waiting for you to do it. You can probably make a living, maybe even make a killing at doing it full time. And none of those things is true. We're not anti-passion. We think passion is lovely, but it's usually the outcome of the well-lived, well-designed life rather than the starting place. If you're lucky enough to have a starting single life organizing passion, and you can do it, that's great. But let's not start with a question that doesn't make sense for 8 out of 10 people. You know, and then my personal favorite, are you being the best you? Are you being the best you? I mean, are you sure this is really it, this thing you're doing? You know, you're not settling, are you? I mean, Stanford, Harvard people, we don't do settling. Now, if these questions bother you, then you're probably falling for this best thing. And now, once again, I mean, what the heck is wrong with wanting to be your best self, you know? Well, here's what's wrong with it. The word best has a denotative meaning. It means a series of alternatives can be evaluated against one set of objective criteria, which you can understand against these alternatives, and then you can decide which one is the best one. I recently had to replace the little outboard motor on my little tiny sailboat, you know, and I had to do an evaluation. I can tell you against my criteria which is the best one to buy, and I just bought it. And I feel confident that I did the right thing. It's the best motor for me. But the problem is we're talking about life here, life design. And now I'm 67, I'm on my 6th career. I have 5 adult children. A couple of weeks from now, I'll have 9 grandchildren. So you tell me what's better. I could lean into, I'm a part-time New York-based mentor to CEOs and coaches in a social impact incubator. I am now a higher education educational reformer. I'm now really a coach trainer. I'm an author, and I'm a grandfather of 9 people. Now you tell me, what's better, grandfathering or coaching social impact CEOs, or writing the 3rd and 4th book that Penguin wants us to write? I can't do them all at the same time. Which one's better? They're totally different. It's not even apples versus oranges. It's like apples versus frogs versus steel. I mean, quickly, what's better, frogs or steel? So the problem is there is no best you, but there are lots of good yous. This is also, by the way, where the problem of FOMO comes from, fear of missing out. People are drowning in fear of missing out, particularly right now during the pandemic, because FOMO actually is the fact of missing out. Of course you're missing out. We're all bolted to this darn Zoom screen. You know, nobody can go. I just canceled a trip for the 2nd time because I'm in the fire zone in California and there's nothing but smoke everywhere I go. So we are missing out, and that fact is really informing our fear that, boy, my whole life might be missing out. That's a horrible thing. So we recommend you want to go, if you really understand this best version of you thing, because there is so much aliveness in each of us, there is no way there's just one of you in there. Each of us has more aliveness than one lifetime permits us to live. So you go from FOMO to JOMO. And by JOMO, I mean the joy of missing out. Every time something goes by that looks interesting, or go, oh my God, was that it? I'm coming from the world of scarcity. I'm scarce, the world is scarce. No, I'm huge, the world is plentiful. There's lots of interesting things going on. Seeing something go by that's interesting that you haven't got time or commitment to attend to is not, oh no, I missed it. It's like, oh, what a wonderful reminder. I live in a target-rich world. I have the joy of missing out. By the way, if you are not noticing what you are missing out, you are just not paying attention. Of course you're missing out. You are mostly not going to happen because this content of your aliveness way overwhelms a lifetime's amount of opportunity to express it. You're not going to be fulfilled in the sense of getting it all in, but you can be fully alive. So that brings us to a reframe. There is not one right you. That is probably the single biggest reframe we've done. It is an immense relief to people. Watch out for all the exclusively minded. Have you got it figured out yet? Do you know what your career plan is? Are you on the right path? Do you know what you want to do? All those questions presuppose an exclusively right answer, and there isn't one. You know, there's lots of great yous or good yous. So let's go try them out. Let's try to design them, which brings us to this whole way of thinking we call design thinking. So here's a semester course on design thinking very quickly, because that's not default for all of you. We've been teaching design thinking at Stanford since 1963. It is the oldest interdisciplinary program at the university, integrating engineering, art, and psychology. And we brought these things together in a way that, you know, was kind of the lunatic fringe for the first 35 or 40 years, frankly. But in the last 15 years, it's gotten really sexy and popular for some pretty good reasons. Now, the best way to understand it is to contrast with other understandable ways of thinking. Engineering thinking. I've got 2 engineering degrees. Engineers are great, and they solve tame problems, really well-bounded, understood problems with knowledge that's applicable. And we know about steel, we know about trusses, we know about stresses, we know about what cars weigh, and we can build a bridge and it'll stand up and it'll work every time. You tear that thing down, rebuild it again properly, it will work the second time just like the first time. That is a nice solution. You can solve your way forward as an engineer. In business, lots of business people, you know, walking into your offices probably. In business, you are never right and you are never done. Customer never loves you enough, profits never high enough, supply chains never efficient enough, you know, your sustainability and your green, you know, CRM is not clean enough, but your stockholders not well taken care of, but you absolutely can get better. And if you go to the right graduate school, you can even get better quantitatively, you know, and that's how you optimize your way forward constantly. We have research thinking. A lot of research done at Stanford and at Harvard, other places, where we go back all the way to Aristotle's ideas on the creation of rigorous knowledge through hypotheses, dependent, independent variables, peer review of this whole detailed process of how do you invent knowledge, you know, and that's called research. It's an analytic approach to solving that particular kind of a problem. But there's a whole bunch of problems. None of these works on real well. Messy problems, or what we call wicked problems. You don't know what you're looking for until you find it. When you find it, you can't transfer it somewhere else because it's not relocatable. You know, it was conceived by urban planners. You know, you can't pick up New York and drop it on Peoria and expect it to work. It just doesn't work. Same thing's true of a life. These are human problems. And for that, design thinking, where we build our way forward empirically, because we're all trying to build this thing no one has any data on. It's called the future. We haven't been there before. So we need to sneak up on the future through the core activity of what we call prototype iteration. We're going to try things in the empirical real world, learn our way forward, and build it that way. What is design thinking? It is a process and a mindset. The process has 5 steps: empathy, definition, ideation, prototyping, and test. We start with empathy. Deeply understand the situation. In life design, that means understand yourself and the domain of the world you want to go participate in. Then and only then can you define your problem. We problem find before we problem solve. Then we have a whole bunch of ideas in order to know what to do. No, we have a whole bunch of ideas in order to know what's a worthy thing to prototype, where our curiosity wants to go and grow into conceiving that idea we couldn't have had any other way. We iterate that process until something is worthwhile to actually visit on the world in reality and implement. We test that before we implement it, and then off we go. But before we begin all that, certainly in product design and absolutely in life design, is step 0. Step 0 is acceptance. You cannot solve a problem you're not willing to have. And a lot of your clients are probably like our students and clients, and their problem isn't really their problem, it's their problem with their problem, and that is a problem. Because if you've got a problem with your problem, that's an insoluble problem where you have to start here. There's a great big "You Are Here" sign, like in an airport locator map, over the graduate studio at Stanford to remind our grad students, you have to start where you are, and that's certainly true in coaching. The mindset of a designer begins with curiosity, you know, and then is surrounded, because that's where the energy is always to be found, the natural human energy. Then we go off and we collaborate with other people radically, not meaning radical people, but radically inclusively, hearing all the points of view. Having heard all those, we are going to get a new understanding and have to reframe our ideas. As we go forward, keep our process well in mind, knowing when we're flaring and having lots of ideas, when we're judging and narrowing down and not mixing those two things up. When in doubt, do stuff. We don't do this on the couch. We don't do this in our head. We do it in the world with a bias to action. Am I moving fast enough for you? Okay. Now, we take that basic design approach and now designing a person is a little more complex than designing like a computer mouse that I did for Steve Jobs like 40 years ago. So we augmented the program. So we took the design process and we added to that the meaning-making layer and the discovery layer. The meaning-making layer addresses the big questions. You know, does this really work for me? Is this meaningful? And then the discovery and support process is, I'm a growing person. I'm going to keep evolving over time. What are the infrastructures and the systems and the platforms I need to put in place to be a person who can keep growing into discerning and doing the things that will keep my life alive and coherent? Now, the full content, what is the course really? What is designing your life? Well, if you take it at Stanford, it looks like that. That's the literal syllabus of the 10-week course at Stanford. That's a little much to cover right now. So all we're gonna do is cover a couple of key topics. We're gonna jump now into having heard about the problem, what's design thinking in DYL in a nutshell, we're gonna get to the coaching point of view. Now, what is our coaching point of view? Now, we literally do a coaching certification training. We didn't want to do that, by the way, when we first came out with the book. The book comes out and we get deluged by life coaches and experienced coaches and executive coaches saying, we love this stuff. Would you give us additional training so we can use these tools really well for our clients? And we said, look, that's a lovely idea. There's actually a Facebook video you can watch on this if you want that says, hey coaches, come on down. If you're a good coach, you've got some experience, you know what you're doing, and you can read, you're good to go. Get yourself a book, read it. It'll make sense, I'm sure. And then go do the right thing. That was not well received. We got a lot of unhappy fan mail from that video saying, no, we really do want more training. So we finally put that together and we did a 1.5-day training course a bunch of times, and then we've now taken it online because we have to. So I'm not selling that. You can find out about it on our website if you want to. But the whole point being, we've been hanging out with coaches for a while now, and what we do is we don't teach you to coach, and we don't even teach you DYL in the coaching training. You can learn that other way. So you come to the coaching training only if you know you want to learn this stuff. You've already learned designing your life. You've already been certified in some coaching system and model. You've been working for some period of time, and you're simply augmenting your toolkit with our stuff. And we dive right in and go into tools in some detail and talk about how to use them, which means we ought to confess our point of view about what coaching is. And here's how we describe that. Generally, we kind of think there's sort of 2 points of view about coaching, which I call in vivo and in vitro. These are, lab terms: in vivo, in life; in vitro, in glass or in petri dishes. So in the in vitro approach to coaching, it's systematic. You start at the top, step 1, and then you go step the last. I remember one work group I hung out with for some time had the 5-step impact leadership development model, IMPACT, and we will tell you how in the 5 steps of IMPACT to become a competent leader. It's not bad stuff, because it's curricular in nature. Here we go. We know what we're doing. The coach is the expert. Sometimes they really think you're pretty cool. It's a lot easier to manage because you know what you're doing. It's very reassuring to the client. Hey, people who've done the hard work are giving me the tools I really need at this time. It tends to be outside in. Here comes the stuff into you. Now, in vivo, in life, is situational. It always starts with the question, hey, what's going on? What's on your mind? It assumes that reality we're living in will surface the critical issues soon enough. You don't have to wait for the curriculum to do it. Life will do it for you. It is tool-based. You don't do it in order. You got this toolkit and you do the right thing at the right time, grabbing the right tool according to your competency. So you have to be an artful facilitator. It's a little tougher to manage, because of that dynamic nature of it, and it's a little unsettling sometimes to the client. Like, well, where are we going here? Well, let's trust the system, which isn't a system. But it is reassuring as we go on because it has the authentic feel of we're doing the real deal. Now, the whole point being, Dave and Bill have a strong bias toward in vivo. We eschew the word system. This is not the designing your life system. It does not have a beginning and an end. We could shuffle the chapter order in the book with no trouble whatsoever. And it's a toolkit. Barely a methodology, but it's do the right thing. You're the pro. The individual who's doing it themselves without assistance, they're the expert on their lives. If you're the coach, you're the expert on both the client and your approach to things. We're just a couple more tools. Okay, that's our point of view. Now, let's dive quickly into some tools. And yeah, you're really getting this at even high speed for me because we're doing this big overview. And now we're going to give you some core content because Jeff wants to make sure we actually get some real core meaty stuff before you get out of here. Okay, so thing 1, the Good Time Journal. Really good starting place, particularly for coaches. The Good Time Journal in our framework, and by the way, this framework that I've shown you is not in the book. It's in the Stanford class, it's in our workshops, but it was a little too complex for a book. The book just has the mindsets. The mindsets are a simple organizing model. So you won't see the stuff in the book, but you see the tools in the book. So the Good Time Journal is a good empathy step for really understanding yourself. And it can be a practice over time to stay on top of a self-awareness maturity. So a practice something you do regularly. This came actually out of, again, client work we did over a long period of time. It's incredibly simple. You got this little chart, and you simply look at four things: activities, engagement, flow, and energy. So you write down on the little lines, the activities of your day, and you notice as time goes, you do this for a couple of weeks, and how engaged was I? How participative was I? Was I fully in there and working on it hard? Was I holding back? And did it even hit flow? The psychology of optimal performance, did it actually enter the state of flow in the zone? That would be a very high level of engagement. And then what was my energy, particularly coming out? Now you could be in high engagement and low energy. By energy, it's done. I may be tired, but was it life-giving to me? Does it energize me? That's what we're looking for. And you do that over a period of time to understand who you really are. This has been transformative for a lot of clients. Like, oh, that I almost lost. There's an engineer story in the book about a guy that almost gave up engineering to go off into financial planning, which would have been a nightmare, because what he really realized was he loves engineering. He just hates all the client stuff. Give me a closed room and a cubicle. Just make me solve the really hard problems and not talk to anybody. I'm such a happy person. And he learned that through this tool. This is actually Bill. So he's got an art class, budgeting, office hours, faculty meetings, teaching, masters, coaching his grad students, and a bunch of different gradings and engagements. And what you do is you notice, what am I seeing here? So for instance, like on masters coaching, masters students are Bill's favorite people, and his engagement was low and his energy was negative. Oh, holy cow, that's surprising, because I think it's my favorite thing. He had to go evaluate what's going on. Turned out he was doing it in the wrong place. He flipped the whole thing over in no time. Faculty meeting, pretty low engagement, energy is high or low. I mean, it really ping pongs around what's going on there. Oh, I love it when we talk about students in science. I hate it when we argue about the copier. Because he's the director, he gets to change the way the meeting gets run, so he can fix that. And of course, he totally gets off on going to art class. So this is a way to start learning what's going on. It's a very simple assessment tool. I would imagine many of you do something not at all unlike this. Now, the Good Work Journal is a modified version of that tool that's in the second book, Designing Your Work Life. And there's each day do an end of day reflection, kind of a variation on the gratitude thing, but instead of gratitude, I'm looking for three things. What's working at work in terms of what did or who did what did I learn? What did I initiate, and who did I help? And we pick those questions because, it's about growth. I'm learning. That actually is the kind of stuff that my curiosity wants to lead into. What did I initiate? This shows where I've got energy, I've got commitment, I'm willing to actually take action. It's a lot easier to go from action to action than from stasis to action. And who did I help? What are my constituencies? Where am I making an impact? This is a different kind of thing, along with the regular good time journal, to deeply understand what's really working at work. Okay. Tool number one. Tool number two, about compass, which is the life view and work view exercise. Boy, is this working for me? Is this life I'm in actually making any sense? So we recommend that in order to do that, you need to build your compass in order to connect the dots. What dots are we connecting? Who are you, what you believe, and what you do? The research shows that if you can interconnect those dots in a meaningful way, including compromises, no one's perfectly synchronously aligned with themselves. But if you can say, yeah, I think what I'm doing here, I'm teaching at Stanford and I'm talking to these people at IOC, that's what I'm doing. And I believe in coaching. I think it's worthwhile. And who am I? I feel like I'm a teaching mentor kind of guy. So these things line up. This feels pretty good. Turns out if you can get those dots to interconnect in a meaningful way, your chance of experiencing meaning making in your life goes up. Conversely, if you can't, it goes down. And far and away, the number one place in life that people experience meaning making is work. It's what we call pursuing the coherent life, where who I am, what I believe, and what I'm doing are in alignment. Our core exercise to help people understand their coherency is what we call the compass. It's just two things. It's a life view and a work view. Life view is like a worldview. What are your answers to the big questions of life? We have a little exercise about it, half a page assignment to write a 2/3 of a page essay. There's even a simplified fill in the blank version, believe it or not, that CEOs use because they won't do homework. And then there's the work view, which is what's kind of my manifesto of what good work is. And we do a compare and contrast and look at whether or not we are living coherently and our life and work views are in alignment. That's one way to get started. Second only to prototype conversations. This is the number 2 most commonly referred to tool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, people are calling back and going, gosh, this has been really helpful. I took another look at my compass and here's what I'm finding. Because of course, you're never done these things. You're just editing your version of the current draft. Okay, tool number 3, the big dog, the Odyssey Plan. This is sort of the centerpiece of the Designing Your Life orientation to things and toolkit. We're well known for this thing. We regret calling it a plan because it's really the Odyssey ideation exercise. It helps you empathize with the outside world. It definitely is a way to come up with ideas, and it tees up prototyping. That's the most important purpose of it. I'll finish with that. But it is not a plan. It's just an idea. So it's an ideation exercise. So we're going to look at your alternative futures. Plural, it has to be plural because there's more than one of you in there. We already know that from the you're not just one best person. So, you know, we actually do this 3 things. So I was at a pilot one time in a large corporation I can't name, but they do a lot of search. And a senior VP of HR was involved, and she said, gosh, you know, our PDP, our professional development plan, we spent $1 bajillion on putting this thing together. It's world-class, but frankly, I don't think it's very good. What do you think? I said, yeah, I think you're probably right. It's not very good. And she goes, well, do you know what's wrong with it? I go, yeah, I do. And she says, well, can you help me fix it? I go, will you tell me what's wrong? I said, no, I won't tell you. She goes, that seems snarky. I go, no, I don't need to tell you. I'll show you today. I'll shout your name across the room, hey, Jane, you know, and I'll tell you, you'll see live and in person what's going on. And it was when we did the Odyssey plan, I shouted, hey, Jane, I go, this is it. She goes, what? I go, it's 3, not 1. You're not just one person, you know, my professional development plan, no, what are my professional development alternatives and which one am I picking at present? Because again, there's more than one of me in there. One of the reasons people don't love their plan is something deep in their psyche knows that it's not the only thing. There really isn't one right answer to most people. I mean, some people really can't imagine doing anything else. So that's lovely for them, but that's really truthfully rare. And the more talented you are, it's more rare. And so it's 3, not 1. Now, what's it look like? It's a worksheet. You can get it free, downloadable. 3 panels look just like this, where there's 5 years, 0 is today, and then you lay in a timeline of professional and personal activities. I'll give you an example in just a second. Then you write a little title of if you lived that movie into reality, what would that movie be titled? You know, then there are these questions you ask, not questions about the plan, but questions living this way would enable you to answer, or at least get insight on. This again is because we believe people are growing people, they're becomings, and that part of what we're looking at in designing our lives is what are we growing into? And then lastly is the dashboard. The dashboard has these gauges on it, which are a little unusual. Let me explain them. These are the feedback loop where the client actually hears from herself, what do I think about my ideas? What's the resource dial from 0 to 100% of what's necessary to execute the plan? Money, training, contacts, structures, what have you. Do I have what it takes? What's my temperature gauge? Am I hot or cold on this thing? I love it. I'm boiling. I'm cold. I had one student walk up and go, I have 3 really cool plans. Only problem is that I'm ice cold on all 3. What does that tell me? It goes, it tells you, you get another form because you're going to do numbers 4 through 6 because it's a great thing to learn 3 things you don't want to do. Then the confidence, you know, my full or empty of the gas tank of confidence. Do I actually think this will work? Some people might say, wait, isn't that really just the resource dial another way? Yes and no. One is objective, one is emotional. You know, the objective evaluation is the resource thing, the emotional intelligence is, and do I believe those resources can actually pull it off for me or not? And then most importantly, coherence. Again, we just talked about that. Is this a coherent plan? Is it an authentic plan? Is this a real me? Is the voice of this plan one of my voices, or do I hear my mother yet again? There's my freshman advisor saying, you really should be a doctor. No, that's not coherent, but maybe it is a real one of you. Okay, so an example would be, here comes Anne. Anne is an amalgam of actually 3 women we actually know, and we'll call her a senior HR exec, and she's reconsidering her second plan of maybe I wanna go back and pick up that idea I had in my 20s, never did anything with, to work with kids. In fact, what I wanna do is I wanna use what I know, I'm gonna have a second career working with kids, focusing on the issue of reading. I'm going to help struggling kids with early reading comprehension. Boy, if we could help kids get reading comprehension early, we could change their lives. Boy, you get behind in that, you're screwed. You get ahead of that, you're really ahead of the game. That's my focal point. I don't need to invent that, by the way. I'm just going to prototype and evaluate off-the-shelf curriculum. What I'm going to be good at is developing a scaling service. I am an operations person. I know how to build stuff, you know, because this is a real project. This is not on the side. This is the real deal. If I do it, year 4 and 5, I hope to be having this thing take off and stamping it out all over the country. You know, it's about proliferation. Boy, if I get that busy, you know, I'm going to be in a startup a couple of years from now. You know, let's not forget the family. What I'm now doing, by the way, is narrating what the head of a person doing this exercise feels like with a pen in your hand. I'm thinking out loud with my pen. Boy, don't forget the family, she says. mom and dad are aging, we got to decide what to do. Is they maybe need some more help. They don't want to live with any of us. They want to be on their own. So we maybe have to find a place for them. And let's not forget, we got to get that family tree, the family story project figured out. Mom and dad are both only children. If they die or move into dementia, we're going to lose the story forever. We keep not writing it down. We got to write it down. I hate writing stuff down. I hated school. Oh my God, I should go back to school. I think this is interesting, but I'm actually incompetent. I know nothing about children. I should take some classes at least. I don't know if I need a master's degree, but at least I got to take some courses. Boy, this is really going to be busy. I need a vacation. Before that year 5, if this works, God forbid, I better take a vacation. Dawn and I, my husband, we always said we'd go back to Paris after that honeymoon 15, 20 years ago. Never did. Maybe we should do that. And even though it's not on the way, let's swing by the Galapagos on the way home before it submerges. And if I had any time left at the end of the year, I had a little paper left at the end of my 5th year, what else would I do? Well, I'm probably going to take a break and have a drink, but frankly, maybe I just write a book, because that's a really cool plan. If I pull this off, I should write a book. And actually, one of the people we talked to said it just that way. Now, how does she feel about this? Well, the questions that she could answer by living this way are interesting questions. What's it like to be in the human service, the social realm, rather than in the for-profit business space? She would know. I don't know what that's like, but this woman would know. What is my definition of success? I wonder if I think of success in a very different way after living like this than I do now. And what about being a mom and a daughter? I'm in that sandwich thing between, parenting my kids and my parents. I have a feeling this is going to affect all that. In fact, one of the women we talked to was thinking about this way, chose not to go there because do I really want to get this busy just as my mom is aging? But nonetheless, her dashboard said the resources are in pretty good shape. She has a lot to do. I like it a lot. My confidence is high because I've done things before. I haven't done this, but I've done lots of things. And my coherence, frankly, is only fair. Her coherence is fair, not great, because when she was honest with herself and she looked at all this, she had to say, do I really want to do this? Or do I just love remembering the young woman who thought she might want to do this? Is this actually motivation or nostalgia? And she had to say, I'm not sure I really mean this. I'm going to be visiting people's lives, and I should not be screwing with their lives unless I'm sincere about this. One of the people we talked to about something like this kind of came to the conclusion, I think it's just nostalgia. I love telling the story. I don't want to do the work. Doesn't mean nobody should, but that's the kind of thing the dashboard can help you figure out. So that's what it looks like. Now we're talking about doing 3 times. We don't mean, gee, I could be an educator in, Vermont or Michigan or California. That's 3 addresses of the same plan. I mean, they're pretty different places, but we mean 3 really different versions of you. Preferably the client can just come up with 3 completely different ideas. If they got that, you're fine. Don't give them any further coaching. But a lot of people need some help, and if they do, we give them this little template. Thing 1, usually they know what they're doing, the current version of life that they're in. Let's just assume that goes really well. Again, we're ideating, we're not doing a project plan. This is free form thinking. And thing 2 would be, what if thing 1 died tomorrow? What if you suddenly found out you can't do anymore what you used to be doing? Let's say Bill and Dave, who run the Life Design Lab at Stanford. Actually, Kathy Davies, our managing director, now really runs it. We just sort of act like founders. And after all this Zoom online teaching stuff, the vice provost of teaching and learning at the big building directly across the street from our lab walks over and says, Dave, Bill, guess what? We so found out exactly how to do online teaching. In fact, we have artificial intelligence-based teaching now. And you guys, you're just an education lab. You don't do actual, bona fide, research, NIH kind of research. So as teachers only, you're fired. We don't need any anymore. Bye, guys. Thanks for coming. And like, dude, now what are you going to do? You got to do something else. That's what thing 2 could be. And then thing 3, the wild card, is if money and respect were no object, if I could promise you there's enough money and nobody will laugh, what would you do? And now, why do that wild card is terribly important to us. Why? Not because the wild card's got the best idea. Wild ideas are really important in design because of the problem of ideation and how your brain works. Here's your brain. Let's say it's my brain. Here's your brain on a nice, calm, black and white, rational idea. Like, why don't you give a little coaching pep talk to the people at IOC? That seems rational. I just did a whole bunch of coach training. Yeah, I know how to do that. Totally appropriate. And then here comes this wild tie-dyed idea, that says, maybe I should quit all that and go into the justice thing, which I'm thinking about pretty seriously, actually. And then that little voice inside my head goes, are you crazy? You've worked for decades to make this design your life thing work. You know nothing about the justice system, you know, and if you're going to do it in California, you really got to know how to speak Spanish and be bilingual, and you're not bilingual and you're too old to learn. What's wrong with you? You know, so that little voice, that internal critic pops up whether you want to or not. It's evolution's friend trying to keep you from getting eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, but it's a killer because as soon as that critic turns on, literally, and we can see this in an fMRI machine looking at your brain, a little wall goes up in the back of your brain where ideas happen, cools off, and that brick wall hides from your consciousness a tremendous number of ideas. Now, I don't know if they're good or bad ideas, but if the really cool idea is behind the wall and that little critic is going off, you'll never even know. So the reason we strongly encourage people to have wild ideas, you know, Cirque du Soleil may be hiring, is you got to knock that wall down to have all of your good ideas, all of your ideas, because the good ideas might be in there too. You must learn to defer judgment. You must learn how to practice to turn off the internal critic. And most minds don't do that well. The more executively experienced a person is, almost the worse this gets because they spend all day long just deciding. They're in judgment mode constantly. So it's an important thing to coach people on. Okay, now what do you do with this thing? The whole point of Odyssey planning is not to come up with a plan you're going to implement. It's to come up with ideas that will animate your curiosity in order to go take action in the form of prototyping. The point of Odyssey planning is to come up with things that identifiably say, ooh, I'd like to learn more about that. And then you go off and prototype them. So in Anne's case, you know, she thought writing a book, despite the fact that it was kind of a joke, was really interesting. I'd love to know more about that. And hey, going back to school work. We still, and the two ways you can prototype things in life, because life is not like an engineered product, you take that prototyping idea. The most important thing following your ideas is not a decision, it's a prototype, which you iterate. Prototype iteration is the core of design thinking, because you prototype in order to ask an interesting question, not to prove that we're right, like I'm pretty sure it works, let's go prototype it. No, I know it doesn't work yet. I know I don't know what I'm doing. Let's go prototype it and see what we can learn about it. And in so doing, you'll expose your assumptions, you'll involve other people, because we always do these things together, never alone, you know, and what you're really accomplishing is sneaking up on your future. And in life design, the prototypes are very simple. They're conversations and experiences. Go out and talk to people. This is a get the story conversation, an informational interview, if you will. It is not a transactional conversation. You're not asking for money, you're asking for a job or impressing somebody. You're kind of going, gosh, you know, Jeff, you know, you were in Berlin, we couldn't get together on the phone, you're running around the world doing this thing, and you're the Institute of Coaching affiliated with the medical school. Boy, that sounds really, tell me more. See, that's the tell me more conversation. And then an experience like, could I do a ride along? Could I do a visit? Could I do a small project? Get my feet wet a little bit, and then iterate, iterate, iterate. So those are the 4 key tools. Now I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit. We're almost done here and talk about designing your COVID life. So what actually happened was the following. You know, what happened was, you know, we wrote this book, you know, that became this huge bestseller to my great surprise. You know, it's now actually going on 600,000 copies in 23 languages worldwide. And so then what should you do? You should write another book. Now, why did we write Designing Your Work Life? Well, we wrote Designing Your Work Life because people are indeed stuck, like I said earlier, they're particularly stuck at work. We heard back a ton from our readers, man, I need more help on the ground right here in the workplace. 69% of US workers, 85% of global workers are disengaged at work. That is terrible. So people need some help. So we decided to write this book. So we wrote this book, you know, and then what happened next, we released the book at the end of February. 3, 2, 1, welcome to the pandemic, boys and girls. And so this whole thing kind of blew up, and immediately the question came back to us, what I really want you guys to help me do is design our COVID life. Can it design, how does life design, how does work design change under the pandemic? Well, the short answer is it doesn't change at all. It's just harder. It's a new circumstance, not a new concept. But that also wasn't well received. Like, no, we really want that. So we actually have a YouTube channel now, Designing Your COVID Life, with like 7 videos on it. So I'm not going to bore you with all of that, but probably the biggest idea that came out of that is this one. So in Designing Your COVID Life, generative acceptance. If you recall, you know, step 0 is accept. You cannot solve a problem you're not willing to have, and nobody wants to have this problem. So it turns out we've learned in dealing with people on this issue that there are a lot of kinds of acceptance, and you want to do generative acceptance, which the pandemic can teach you how to do. First of all, step 0 is step 5. It turns out the 5th step of the Kubler-Ross grief process, and the whole world is in grief over what we're losing these days, is acceptance. And acceptance is step 0. It's the beginning of where grief ends, design begins, which kind of makes a lot of sense when you think about it. But you've got to go through it. You can't skip it. Number 2, there are 3 kinds of acceptance: oppressed, suppressed, and engaged. The oppressed acceptance, like, okay, well, I guess they haven't got a vaccine yet, so it's more Zoom today. You know, I'm the victim, right? I'm oppressed. And so I'm just getting dragged through this thing. Then there's the suppressed version, which is like, no, I got it. No problem. The heroic, tough guy, you know, tough woman thing, like, you know, and here we go. I got this thing. It's no problem. It's great. It's a huge opportunity. Every problem is an opportunity. Yeah, and it's really painful. And that's, you know, if you stiffen up too hard, then that's going to explode at some point. And then there's the engaged one, which is, you know, takes the healthy part of both. It says, oh man, this is really hard and I'm willing to step up to it, but here we go. Let's try to make something out of this. So the distinction between oppressed, suppressed, and engaged is really significant. You can really see it in a life. You got to engage to stay generative. You know, you got to re-up this thing. And then we noticed about maybe 2-3 months into it, people were showing weary, like, I'm so over it. They were getting tired again. What we really needed was a reframe on this big idea. And we had to borrow from our colleague, I don't know him personally, but I've loved his work, Bill Bridges. The classic book on transitions, ran a consulting company, did nothing but transition management for corporations for years, still going as far as I know. And Bill is like the expert on transitions. It's a great old book, written in the 80s and lots of follow-ons. He will say, it's not the changes that do you in, it's the transitions. Change is not the same as transition. Change is situational, the new site, the new boss, the new pandemic, the new team role. Transition is the psychological process you go through dealing with the change. So he's making a distinction that change is what happens situationally and transition is what you do in responding to it. Now, he's evaluated along with Eric Erickson and all these psychologists how people handle change. And so in this thing called COVID, where am I? Well, we're in the ending of the world that was pre-COVID, and what we want to do is get to the beginning. You know, when is the new normal gonna really start? I want to get there as soon as I possibly can. And what's it going to be, and how do I get a jump on it? Those are the questions we hear all the time. Well, you know, so we're trying to predict where that borderline is. Except, as many of you already know because you've read the book, that's not the way it works. That between an ending and a new beginning, in things of significance, human beings go through a thing in the middle called the neutral zone. And the neutral zone, you can't skip the neutral zone. You can't go from clarity to clarity. You go from clarity to ambiguity to clarity. It's a 3-step process. And the neutral zone, you simply have to go through, whether it's puberty, whether it's the pandemic, you know, whether it's going, you know, from a corporate life to a gig life, you got to go through the neutral zone. And a whole lot of people are trying not to be there. Where they are is the waiting room. So we noticed in the COVID world, about 2-3 months in, people are renewingly frustrated. We thought, when is it done yet? And that language told us people were not in the neutral zone. They weren't really accepting that we're going through a transformative ambiguity onto a new place, that they're kind of going like, is it over yet? Is my penalty box time up yet? And I get back to the world as I knew it. That's the waiting room. And people who are in the waiting room, when in fact the reality is the neutral zone, are in trouble. So I think there's a real opportunity to help people from a coaching point of view get out of the waiting room, which isn't going to work because the world they want to get back to when the wait is over isn't there anymore. Through the neutral zone to a new beginning. You are here. So we are still in that neutral zone. And designing your life is a really good set of tools because it's empirical, because it's situational, you know, and you can start prototyping your way forward. Okay, way done here. We said about 45 minutes and here it is. If I had to nail the whole thing down in a very short process, 10 words: get curious, talk to people, try stuff, and tell your story. Tell the story of what you're learning, having talked to people and trying stuff that you're curious about. It's a virtuous process that gives your curiosity legs. You get out there in the world and take it, and you repeat that process, lather, rinse, repeat, until something engages you fully, and then you are in fact designing your life and your work. Okay, now, should I really trust you guys? Well, okay, look, you're not the guinea pigs. We've been doing this for quite a while. It's been proven with thousands of people, both, you know, on campuses. We've trained over 200 different schools to do this kind of stuff, you know, and at Stanford, we don't get to use alternative facts. We're actually required to use real facts. We have to have research-based and research validated. And sure enough, the people with the white coats came over and said, it all looks fine to us, people from psychology and education. And let's not forget, design thinking is a cute name for what's really known as human-centered design. It's how do humans innovate things that humans can use. It's all about humanity. And that's what a life is, isn't it? So as we're all trying to become more, more successful, passionate, connected, care-loving, certainly, innovative, world-changing, and downright dazzling. I mean, why else would I hire a coach? All Bill and our team are trying to tell the world is, could we just be a little more human? Maybe even fully human. Then we might leave the campground in a better place than we found it. So with that, thank you for your time, and thank you, IOC, for inviting me to hang out with the community. And then we're going to go live, and this video is going to stop, and the real Dave Evans, with luck and connectivity, is going to show up and take some questions.